So this weekend I was sitting around thinking about all the different aspects that go into creating a really powerful website. There's some people that focus more on accessibility or performance or even the strategy side of things. But it's really hard to spend all of your time on all of those things. And I got curious about how different people would allocate their time or resources towards all these different categories. So I wanted to create some kind of survey. Unfortunately, trying to do this inside of a Facebook group is pretty worthless, so I knew I needed to create something unique with WS Form. Mark from WS Form was kind enough to help me get through all of this, and what I ended up creating is pretty interesting. So I wanted to create a video today to show you exactly how it was done, and also to encourage you to fill out this form yourself, as I'd really like to understand this data from everyone inside of our community. Let me go ahead and show you what I've set up, and then I'll take you through the process of building the entire thing from scratch. So here's what I'm calling the Website Prioritization Survey. It's a bit of a thought exercise, and I've divided the website creation process into 5 key areas, that being strategy, design, content, accessibility, and performance. Now, you might focus really heavily on design and barely think about accessibility. Everybody's approach is completely different. But how do your priorities stack up against others? This form gives you 100 points to allocate across these 5 different areas. You can then use these sliders to reflect the focus you have on each one of these different categories. Your total in the end needs to add up to 100, and once you've equaled 100, the form validates, and you're able to submit this and see all the results. So we'll go ahead and submit this here, and you can see your allocation for each one of these categories and the average of everybody who's submitted this form in the past. It's a pretty cool way to display all this information dynamically, and all of this is made possible by WS Form. And honestly, it's pretty easy to set up. So if you're interested in seeing how we can do all these calculations, set up the different actions and conditions that need to be present, and display all this information dynamically, then you're in the right place. So let me show you exactly how it's done. Okay, rather than doing this on the live admin bar website, I decided to just spin up a blank install. And first, I just wanted to show you what I have going on in this install. It's very, very simple. I just have the Generate Press theme installed and activated. And then in my plugin areas, I have the Generate Blocks and Generate Blocks Pro plugins, since that's how I typically build sites out. Although what you're seeing here will work with just about any system. I also have the GP Premium plugin installed. Again, that's just part of my stack, and it helped me kind of simplify this install a little bit. And then most importantly, I have the WS Form Pro license installed and activated in here. So what we're going to do is just start by building the form completely from scratch. If we go in here to my forms, you can see I haven't even opened this up yet. So we'll go ahead and go through the little demo process, and we can create our first form by just using the blank template. Now we want to go ahead and give this form a title, so I'll just call this survey just to keep it simple. And we're going to try to organize the information in here inside of different sections of the form. The sections are pretty much invisible on the front end, though it does give you a place to stylize things. But I just want to do it for organization purposes here, because we're going to have quite a few different types of fields in here, and I think it'll just make a whole lot more sense in the end. So we get a section by default here. I'm just going to go ahead and click on that, and we're just going to call this categories. Now inside of this is where we're going to have all the different sliders in here. So for that, I'll just go back to our toolbox, and we can skip this tutorial. We don't need that. And what we need here is a range slider. So I'm going to go ahead and search for range, and we'll go ahead and drop that range slider in this category section. Go ahead and click on the cog here so I can start making changes. And we're going to title this one strategy, since that is the first different category we're going to have inside this form. Now we want to go ahead and set some of the defaults in here. Under the Advanced tab in the Restrictions area, I want the minimum to be set to 0, which just happens to be the placeholder, and we'll have the maximum set to 100. I don't want people to have to change this one step at a time, so we're going to move this increment to 5, so it'll move from 0 to 5 to 10 to 15, etc. Lastly, I want to go in this Basic tab here, and I want to set the default value to 0. Otherwise, with this range slider field type, it'll start in the middle, which is kind of confusing for this setup. So now that we have this field all set up, it's ready to go. This is going to be the same for each one of these different categories. So I'll just go ahead and save that now. And now I can duplicate it and just change out the name for each of these. So we'll click on this next one, and this next one is going to be design. Again, we'll save that. We'll duplicate it. This next one will be content. Save that and duplicate it. For this one, we want accessibility. Again, save and duplicate. And then for this last one, we're going to do performance, and we'll save it. So now that we got all those saved, let's go ahead and open up a preview on the front end just so we can see how this is shaping up so far. Like I said, you can't see that section in here. It's kind of invisible, but we have each one of these rangefinder fields here that we can slide back and forth. And you can see the help text here shows you exactly what you're on. It's stepping by 5s, which is exactly what we wanted. And all of these are working perfectly. Now, just to show you this little help text here, if we go back into any one of these fields, you can see the help text is set to the value of the range slider. So that's why we're able to see what we've set here, which is just going to be handy for people as they start figuring out how they're going to arrange all of these different sliders. Next, let's go ahead and add a new section. And here, this is going to be our calculations. So inside this section, we're going to actually add a hidden field here. This is going to help us do some of the calculations for the back end. That is going to help us be able to set some of the conditionals, but it's not going to show on the front end. So I'm just going to do this as a hidden field since that's already built in here to WS Forms. And we'll go ahead and click into this field and just call it total. Now what we want to do inside this field is create a calculation that essentially just adds up the sum of all the different values people put into this slider. So to do that, it's actually pretty easy here in WS Form. There's a calculate button right here that will go ahead and open up a simple calculator for you, and it will put in the value you need here to do a calculation. Now what we can do is just insert these fields dynamically. So if I click on strategy, it's going to bring in that code here for the strategy field. And all I have to do is add a space, a plus symbol, and then go ahead and add in the next one, which is design. And I'll just repeat this process for each one of these fields until I can build out the entire calculation that I need to get done. So now that I have all of these adding together, we can go ahead and save this field here, but I want to set up another field that actually show how many points people have left to allocate. Now to do this, we'll go back into our toolbox here, and I'm going to search for the word text so I can bring in this text editor field. We'll just drag this in here just below the calculations. We'll go ahead and give this a title of available points. And we can click the cogwheel to get in here and start working on it. Now, essentially what I want to show in here is how many points people have left. So I'm going to say points left and then colon, and then we need to update this value dynamically based on a calculation. Now, it's a very similar calculation to what we just did here in the total. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the settings for this total field, and we'll copy this calculation here so we can reuse it. Back here inside of our available points, I'll just enter a space and then paste that in here. Now this is going to add them all together, and what I actually want to show is how many points they have left. So to do that, I'm just going to add an additional parentheses here, and we'll do 100 minus, and then we'll make sure to close our parentheses here so our field validates. Now we'll go ahead and save this here, and when we do, we can go ahead and preview the form again and make sure it's working. You can see as we have 0 points assigned to each one of these sliders, we can see we have 100 points left. But as I start moving this, you can see our points left starts to decrease. So we know this calculation is working perfectly, and that will help people as they try to assign each of these point values inside of the slider here. Back inside of our form, let's go ahead and add another section here for our submit button. So we'll just go ahead and call this submit for the section here. And we need to go back into our toolbox so we can get a submit button. So here we have a button already set up for that. So I'll just go ahead and put it here inside that submit section. We'll change this label to submit and see all results. And now we can go ahead and save this again. And if we preview on the front end, our button now shows up. At this point, we have all the fields we need for the form to work, but I'd like to do a couple additional things to help validate the form. First, I want to show a message if somebody's successfully added up to 100 points, or give them a message if they still need to work on the form to end up getting to that 100. So let's take a look at how that's done. So to do that, I'm just going to add another section here. Again, you don't have to break these forms up into all these sections. I just kind of like doing it for organizational purposes so I know where everything's at. And eventually I think I am going to rearrange some of these, and it makes it easy to rearrange groups of fields together. So for here, we'll just call this messages. Now inside this messages section, we're going to add 2 different message fields. So if we go back to our toolbox and we search for message, we have a message field here we can go ahead and drag in. What I want in here is a good and a bad message. So we'll just go ahead and set up this first one as good. So we'll just give it the title of good. Now the type of message here is going to be success. And inside that message, I'm just going to say, great, your total adds up to 100. You can submit the form and see how your results measure against the averages. This way, once somebody's equaled 100, they'll get this message. We're going to have to set up those conditions here in a second, but that's what I want them to see so they know they can go ahead and submit the form. Now I want another message to show that they haven't quite equaled 100 yet, so they have instructions on what to do or why they're not able to submit the form. So we'll go ahead and save this here, and we can clone this field. And in this copy of it, we'll just go into our settings and we'll change this to bad. We can change this message type to information, and we'll just make sure this message says, make sure your selections add up to 100. Again, let's go ahead and save this and preview it on the front end. Now you can see both of our messages are showing up here. We have to do some conditions in order to show or hide the right ones. And actually, I think seeing this in blue, I actually want this to be a different kind of message. So I'm going to change this from information to warning. And if we save that and preview it again, that will come with this yellow background, which I think is going to get a little bit more attention for people to know that something's not quite right with their form yet. So let's go ahead and set up some of these conditions. To do that here inside WS Form, we just go into this conditional logic builder, and it's actually really simple to use. So we'll go ahead and add a new condition here, and I'm just going to call this check for 100, because essentially we're going to be validating this information whenever all their sliders add up to 100. So what we'll do here in the if statement is say if the total, which if you remember is this total field we set up that's doing the calculations for us, if it does not equal 100, then we want to do something. So essentially, until this equals 100, here's what we want to do. So in our then statement, we'll go to our good message, which is the success message. You've added up to 100 here, and we'll set the visibility to hidden. Now, inversely, we want to change the visibility to visible if that condition is not met. So let's just save that so you can see what this looks like in practice. Right now, we're going to see this bad message no matter what. But if we change one of these sliders to equal 100, we can see now we're getting the success message here. So let's set up a similar condition for the bad message as well. So we can leave this if statement alone. All we need to do is set another set of rules up here in our then statement. So here we'll select our bad message, and we'll say set visibility is visible if it does not equal 100. And conversely, on the bad message, set visibility to hidden, which is done by default by WS Forms. Whenever you add one of these conditions, it will go ahead and try to estimate what that next condition is going to need to be. You'll see on the first one, because I changed from the default visible to hidden, I had to go change this in the else statement as well. But since this was the default, it went ahead and did the inverse of that here. So again, let's just check our work and make sure it's working. You can see right now our totals do not add up to 100, so we're getting the bad message. But as soon as we add up to 100, that switches out for the good message. So this conditional logic is working. However, we're seeing the button here to submit this at any time, even when the total doesn't add to 100. I don't want to give people the ability to submit this form unless their total is 100, so let's add that to our then statement as well. We'll go ahead and add another condition here, and we'll scroll down till we find our section submit. And instead of visibility on this one, we're just going to set it to disabled. So as long as it's not 100, it will be set to disabled. And we'll scroll down here for our else statement, and we'll set this to not disabled. Again, we'll go ahead and save. And when we check out the preview here, you can see our button is kind of grayed out. We're not able to actually submit that until our total equals 100, and now we're able to submit this form. We're gonna have to go ahead and set up some pages for this form to live on and a thank you page. But before we do that, let's do one more thing inside our form here. Here under actions, we have some actions that come with forms by default, including saving the submission, showing a message, and sending an email. At this point, all I want to do is make sure that we're saving the submission. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this show message and send email. And then let's go ahead and publish our form. Now, like I said, we need to create two different pages here. One is going to be a page for the survey itself. So I'll go ahead and just call this survey. And inside of our editor here, we'll just search for WS form. And we can go here and select this survey form from the dropdown, and you can see our survey shows on the screen. So we'll go ahead and publish that. We'll go back into the back end again, and we'll add a new page. We'll just call this one survey thank you. And for the time being, I think we'll just leave this blank. We're going to go back in and add all that dynamic data to show the results, but we have a few more things to set up in our form first, but we did need to go ahead and get a URL for this thank you page. So we'll go ahead and hit publish now so that thank you page is set up. And let's go ahead and copy this URL for the thank you page while we're at it. We'll go back into the back end again, and we can go back into our form. We'll go ahead and edit it. And let's go back into our actions section here so we can set up the redirect that needs to happen once people submit the form. So here we'll create a new action. We'll call this redirect, and we'll choose the action of redirect, and we can just paste in that URL we just copied to our clipboard, which is that thank you page. Now, if you remember back to our example at the beginning, the thank you page is actually going to show the respondents' results as well as the average results for everybody. So we have some information we need to pull into that page dynamically. To see your own individual results, we're going to set that up using query string parameters, which is already built into this redirect action. So let's go ahead and set those up now. We can click the plus button to start adding those. What we want to create are parameters for each one of these different options in our categories. So for strategy, design, content, etc. So in this field for the first one, I'm going to just type in strategy, and that's going to be our query parameter. And then for the value, I'm actually going to bring in this field. So here is the field 1, which is our one for strategy. I'll go ahead and copy that, and I can paste it here into the value. So this is going to append our URL with a query string, and it will say strategy equals, and then whatever value people selected inside of that slider. Now we need to do that for each one of these, so I'm going to go ahead and set those up using that same process. So we can go ahead and close this window out now, and we can see all of our query string parameters are set in here. Of course, we want to test this, so let's go ahead and save this. We can pop open our preview again, and now that our redirect is set up, we'll just move this strategy. Let's test a couple of them. So we'll go to 50 on strategy and 50 on content, and we'll leave the other one 0. So let's make sure that that's actually coming through in our query string. So now that we've equaled 100, we can see our success message, and we're able to submit this form. So now when we submit it, it redirects us to this thank you page. And you can see up here in the URL, it's added this query parameter. So we see strategy equals 50, design is 0, content is 50, accessibility and performance are both 0. So we know we've set up those query string parameters perfectly. Now all we need to do is be able to display those on the front end of the website. Now, unfortunately, GeneratePress and GenerateBlocks doesn't have a way to bring those query string parameters onto the front end of our website dynamically. I believe there are some other page builders that do this, so you'll have to check with your stack to see if this is available. But if you do use GeneratePress and GenerateBlocks, there is a workaround to this thanks to Taylor Drayson's template tags. If we go here to his Snippet Club website, which I would highly recommend, he has a tutorial here on dynamic template tags. So essentially, this will give you a bunch of different ways to bring in dynamic information onto your website. Now, this is a premium feature, so you have to be a member of his Snippet Club in order to get this, but I already am a member, so I'm going to be able to just copy and paste this code into my install. So to do that, we'll just go back into the back end of the website, and I'm just going to put this directly in my functions.php file. Obviously, this is just a demo site. You would want to use a child theme or a snippets plugin to do this. But since this is just a quick little demo, I'm going to put it directly in the theme. Go ahead and paste that in and hit update file. This is going to give us the ability to display this information dynamically on our thank you page. So if I go in here into the thank you page, we can start setting that up. Now again, I spent some time on the design for the one for the admin bar, but here I'm just going to do something simple to show you how this works without going into a whole design tutorial. So I think we need to make a section for each one of the different categories. So let's go ahead and just do an H2 heading. And this first one was strategy. So under strategy, we want to have two different values, one for your response and another for the average response. So we'll just put in your response and average response. Now here under your response, this is where we're going to want to bring in the information dynamically from the query string up in the URL. So to do that with Taylor's template tags, we type in 2 curly brackets here, and we type the word query dot, and then we put in whatever that query parameter is. So this first one for strategy, I just called that strategy. So we can go ahead and type that in and then close our curly brackets here. Now let's go ahead and save this and just test it and make sure it's working. To do that, I'll go ahead and just view this survey again. on our survey page, I'll just go ahead and bump the strategy up to 100 so we can validate this form. And now when we submit it, we should be taken to the thank you page, and we should see that value for strategy dynamically filled in with this 100, since this is what's going to end up in that query parameter. So we'll go ahead and submit this. We can see we've been taken to the thank you page, and here under strategy, we can see the response is 100. Now we need to add a % after that, and we need to add in the average response rate, which is a feature we're going to plug in from WS Form directly. Let's go ahead and edit this page again. And to be able to bring in that average, we're going to use this short code provided by WS Form. Mark was kind enough to modify the way this system works in order to bring in the average from a slider range. So this update to WS Form actually isn't quite live yet. I was just able to get an advanced copy. However, this will be in his next update, so keep an eye out for that. Now, inside the shortcode, all we need to do is put in the right field ID. I'll go ahead and pop open that form in another window here so we can go into our forms, edit, and we can see that ID is 1. So back in here inside of our thank you page, we'll just change this ID from 397, which is just the value I pasted in, to 1. So now we have this set up where you can see your results and the average response. What's really cool about this average response is it actually queries all the submissions, so this data will get updated every time somebody new adds to this survey. Of course, we need to repeat this process for each of the 5 categories, so I'll go ahead and do that now, and I'll speed through it so you don't have to watch me struggle. So now I've gone ahead and set it up for each one of these 5 categories. So for strategy, you see we've put this query parameter in there, and we've tied it to field 1. Design has design in here in field 2, and so on. So I've just matched all these up so I can bring in all that information dynamically. Again, we'll go ahead and save this, and let's go ahead and test this out. We'll go back to our survey here, and we'll try to fill out something a little bit more reasonable. I'm not saying these are my answers, but just so we can see a variation in here. We have 15 points left, so we'll spend all those on performance. So we should have 20, 30, 15, 20, 15. So we'll go ahead and submit and see all results. And we can see our response here is 20, 30, 15, 20, and 15. Again, I forgot the percentage, so we'll have to fix that. But we can also see this average response for all the testing I've done as I've just kind of submitted this form. It's querying that database and then bringing back the average response. So like I said before, the more this form gets filled out, the more accurate that number will be, and those numbers are always dynamic. Let's go ahead and add our % symbol to the end of all these. So just at the end of them here, I'll add a %. That way it'll make a little bit more sense for the end user. At this point, I think we have everything set up, so it's ready for final testing. We'll go back into our survey here, and we'll do maybe 40 on strategy, 10 on design, 30 on content. Running out of points pretty quickly here. All right, we'll leave this as our final. So 40, 10, 30, 15, 5. We'll go ahead and submit, and we'll see we have our 40% for strategy versus 61 for the field. And this follows that same pattern for each one of these, and all of these are being updated dynamically, which I really think is the magic of doing a survey like this. Obviously, this design is pretty terrible, but if you spend a little bit of time on the design, you can make these results look really nice as well. There's a link down in the video description where you can go submit this survey for yourself and see what the live standings are for each one of these 5 different categories. I think it's pretty interesting to see everybody's unique take on web design and development, and hopefully you can get a little bit of understanding of how other agencies might be working. Now, if you're not already using WS Form, you can go to wsform.com and pick up a copy. There's both a free version, which lives in the repo, and a pro version. I use this on all my sites because of things like I showed you today. There's yet to have been a scenario of a form I needed to build that I couldn't do with WS Forms. Not only that, but it does all the simple forms really well too. There's all kinds of templates already built in, so you can do 1 or 2 clicks and have a form completely built. There's an AI integration where you can just describe the type of form you want and it will build it out for you. There are just so many features packed into this one plugin that I couldn't recommend it highly enough. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate a thumbs up, and if you want to make sure to catch the next one, then hit subscribe and we'll see you then.